Someone once said, if your voice is loud, some people will listen. But if your message is strong, everyone will pay attention. Hi everyone, welcome Tat Channel, and today I have an inspiring story for you.
In a small village, four brothers grew up together under the loving care of their parents. Their childhood was peaceful, but everything changed when their beloved father passed away. With the family's pillar of strength gone, they had to face a difficult reality: the division of their inheritance. After days of discussion, the four brothers finally agreed to divide their father's land and house equally. Each received a fair share, ensuring that no one had more than the others. However, one question remained: who would take care of their mother? She had spent her entire life loving and raising them, but now, in her old age, she had become a problem they needed to solve. After much debate, they reached what seemed like a reasonable decision. Their mother would live with each of them for 1 month at a time, rotating between their homes. This way, no one would bear the responsibility for too long, and she would have the chance to be with all her children. On the surface, it appeared to be a fair arrangement, but beneath it lay a heartbreaking truth: their mother, who had sacrificed everything for them, was now being treated like an object passed from one place to another. The three older brothers saw nothing wrong with this plan, but the youngest brother, a man with a kind and compassionate heart, felt a deep sorrow. He could not bear the thought of his beloved mother having no permanent home, being moved from one house to another. He worried that in the months she spent with his brothers, she might be seen as a burden. Though they were family, who could guarantee that their devotion to their mother would remain strong over time? These thoughts weighed heavily on his heart, and he knew he couldn't stand by and let it happen. That's when he made a decision, one that no one expected. A decision that would change his life forever. After settling the division of their inheritance, the three older brothers felt satisfied. They had secured their shares of the land and no longer had to worry much about taking care of their aging mother. To them, it was a fair and practical solution. But the youngest brother felt uneasy. Deep in his heart, he knew his mother was not some object to be passed from one person to another. She was the woman who had given birth to him, who had dedicated her entire life to her children. And now, in her old age, she had nowhere to truly call home. He couldn't bear the thought of his mother being treated as a burden. Who could guarantee that as she grew weaker, his brothers would always care for her with love and patience? Would there be days when she felt like a stranger in her own children's homes, dreading the moment when her time at one place was up and she would have to move again? The thought alone pierced his heart. After many restless nights, the youngest brother made a bold decision. One day, he gathered his brothers and said, "My dear brothers, I have a proposal. If you agree, please accept it." Curious, the three older brothers asked, "What do you want to say?" Looking at them with sincerity in his eyes, he said, "Let me take care of our mother for the rest of her life. In return, I will give up my share of the land and house. I don't need wealth, I only need her." His words left his brothers speechless for a moment, but then they laughed. To them, he was a fool giving up land and property just to care for an old woman. But if he wanted it so badly, why should they refuse? To them, it was an incredible deal. And so, with unconditional love and devotion, the youngest son gave up everything and brought his mother to live with him in a small hut. Little did he know that this decision would lead him to a future beyond anything he could have ever imagined. From the day he brought his mother home, the youngest son had nothing left, just a small hut and his hard-working hands. But he never complained or regretted his decision. To him, caring for his mother was the greatest happiness. He devoted all his love and effort to ensuring that she lacked nothing every morning. He woke up early to prepare her meals before heading out to work in the fields. No matter how exhausted he was, he always made time to sit with her, to listen to her stories about the past memories of his father, of his own childhood. Every time he saw her smile, his heart filled with warmth. Life was simple, but within their small home, love was abundant. His mother no longer had to worry about being passed from house to house. She knew that no matter how difficult life became, she had a son who was willing to sacrifice everything to ensure she was safe, loved, and at peace. On nights when she fell ill, the youngest son stayed up late, watching over her. Even in his exhaustion, he patiently cooked warm porridge and gently massaged her frail hands. He never saw this as a burden, but rather as a privilege, a chance to repay, even in a small way, the boundless love his mother had given him throughout her life. Time passed. His mother grew weaker, Then, one day, she passed away peacefully in his arms. The pain of losing her was immeasurable, but he felt no regrets. He knew he had done everything to give her the comfort and happiness she deserved in her final years, and as the last tears fell, he had no idea that his devotion was about to bring him a miraculous reward, one that fate had quietly prepared for him all along. After his mother passed away, the youngest son returned to his life of hard labor. Though she was no longer by his side, he carried the warmth of the years he had spent caring for her. He found comfort in knowing that his love and devotion had given her a peaceful final chapter. However, life became increasingly difficult. He and his wife still lived in their small, humble hut, struggling to make ends meet. Despite their hardships, he never once regretted his decision. To him, the greatest treasure was the memory of his mother and his unwavering belief that filial piety would bring unseen blessings. One night, after an exhausting day of work, he fell into a deep sleep. In his dream, 1,000 gold coins shimmered before him. A mysterious voice spoke. "These coins are for you. If you want them, I can tell you where to find them." He hesitated for a moment before asking, "Will these coins bring blessings?" The voice answered, "No, they are merely wealth, without blessings." Without a second thought, the youngest son shook his head and firmly said, "Then I don't want them." The next morning, he told his wife about the dream. She was furious. 1,000 gold coins, and you turned them down. How could you throw away such a chance to change our lives? But he only smiled and said, "I only want what brings blessings." The following night, he had another dream. This time, the voice offered him 100 gold coins. Yet again, when he asked if they carried blessings, the answer was no, and once more, he refused. His wife grew even more frustrated, but his faith remained unshaken. On the third night, he dreamt of only 2 gold coins. The voice spoke again. "These coins hold blessings. Do you wish to receive them?" Without hesitation, he nodded, and the next morning, he set out on a journey to uncover the gift that fate had prepared for him. The next morning, the youngest son told his wife about his dream. Though she had been disappointed many times by his decisions, this time, something felt different. If these coins truly carried blessings, perhaps they shouldn't ignore the sign. Seeing the unwavering determination in her husband's eyes, she nodded in agreement. He set out on his journey, following the directions from his dream. Through dense forests and winding paths, his steps never wavered. Finally, he arrived at a massive old tree, just as he had seen in his dream. Digging beneath its roots, he uncovered exactly 2 gleaming gold coins. Returning home, he happily handed them to his wife and told her to keep them safe. But as they lived in such poverty, his wife hesitated and said, "We've struggled for so long. At least let's use 1 coin to buy some good food and ease our hardship a little." The youngest son looked at her gently and asked, "What would you like to eat?" She thought for a moment before replying, "I've been craving fish. It's been so long since we last had a proper meal." He nodded and took 1 gold coin to the market, purchasing a large fresh fish to bring home. As his wife was preparing the fish, she suddenly gasped. Cutting it open, she found 2 radiant pearls hidden inside its belly. Both husband and wife stood frozen in disbelief. Holding one of the pearls in his hand, the youngest son said, "I will take this to the jeweler and see what it's worth." Without delay, he set off for the city. Upon seeing the pearl, the jeweler was stunned. "This pearl is so rare and valuable that I cannot afford it. But there is one man who can offer you a price worthy of it, the king." The youngest son had no idea that the true gift from fate was still waiting for him just ahead. The youngest son carefully carried the pearl to the royal palace, his heart filled with anticipation. It was the first time in his life he had stepped foot in such a magnificent place. Standing before the king, he humbly presented the pearl and recounted his story. The king took the pearl, examined it closely, then looked at the poor farmer with astonishment. He asked, "Do you realize how valuable this pearl is?" The youngest son honestly replied, "Your Majesty, I only know that it is a gift that fate has given me." The king pondered for a moment before offering a gentle smile. "This is a priceless gem, but if you have a second pearl, I will grant you a reward worthy of them both." Bowing respectfully, the youngest son thanked the king and returned home. When he shared what had happened, his wife quickly brought out the second pearl. Together, they returned to the palace, their hearts filled with hope. When the king saw the pair of exquisite pearls, he could not contain his joy. He turned to the youngest son and said, "Not only are you fortunate to possess these rare pearls, but you also have a heart of great virtue. I have heard the story of your devotion to your mother. A man who gives up his wealth to care for his aging mother deserves the finest reward. The king immediately ordered his servants to load 4 donkeys with as much gold and silver as they could carry and gifted them to the youngest son. Overwhelmed by the unexpected fortune, the youngest son returned home with a heart full of gratitude. As he looked at his wife, he smiled and said, "Do you see? This is the blessing of filial piety. I did not choose meaningless wealth, yet fate has given us more than I could have ever dreamed." And so, through his deep love and respect for his mother, the youngest son not only received blessings, but also found a life filled with abundance, warmth, and true happiness. The youngest son, once a poor man, had now become wealthy thanks to his devotion and sincerity. But to him, the gold and jewels granted by the king were not the most valuable rewards. What truly mattered was the love and respect he had given his mother in the final years of her life. He recalled the day he gave up his share of the inheritance to care for his mother. His 3 older brothers had laughed at him, calling him a fool. They believed they were the clever ones, gaining extra land without taking on any responsibility. But in the end, when their mother passed away, all they were left with was emptiness and regret. Meanwhile, the youngest son received blessings beyond imagination. One day, the 3 older brothers heard of their younger brother's newfound wealth. Filled with jealousy and remorse, they visited him. One of them sighed and said, "We were wrong. We thought money was everything. But in truth, filial piety is the greatest treasure of all." The youngest brother held no resentment. He simply smiled and replied, "Brothers, money comes and goes, but the love and gratitude we show our parents stay with us forever. If I could turn back time, I would still choose my mother over wealth, because there is no treasure more precious than a mother's love." His story spread throughout the region, becoming a lesson in filial piety. People admired his devotion and came to understand that true wealth lies not in material possessions, but in love, kindness, and the blessings that come from a sincere heart. And so, the youngest son not only lived a prosperous life, but also left behind a shining example of devotion, a story that would be honored and remembered for generations to come.